Today for us to start doing some standing and some fighting to back that
And here's the beauty of it. I think about the concept of where we're going in the future, and if school become a little bit less prominent, what's going to happen is art is going to become more prominent because academics and our art is usually something that balances itself out, right? So when you have a student that's not doing well in school as far as learning like math and science, the more hard, concrete, square things, they're going to resort to the more rounded courses that allow them to learn and excel without having to be right. Like, when you go to art, history, English, a lot of times those are the subjects that you can resort to when you're like, I don't want to go to the places where everybody who acts like they're always right can be. And so one of the things that I think is we may be at the precipice, like at the beginning of a transition where the mind of the people that we're around is going to start becoming more like building art or creating content as opposed to trying to fit in to a mold that come from learning like more concrete things that the schools might be giving. So I guess what I'm really saying is, are we getting closer to a point where we're about to enter a new renaissance where, people are really just more focused on experiencing life? Because now you don't have going to jobs. You can go out and experience their neighborhood. People who had to spend their Tuesday afternoon inside of a building now can spend their Tuesday afternoon in the park or at the beach or somewhere enjoying themselves because they're not at work. So I think that that's going to allow for a little bit more flow of mind and flow of heart and flow of creation. And that's something that I'm seeing in my own self as I'm thinking about creating like this podcast. I'm like, now everybody got all this time off. You better create something.
That's right. That's right. More entrepreneurship is happening. More independent businesses are happening. I know I done came up with like 2 businesses over this pandemic, But I think also it's going to be like once this is over, like family is also going to be a focus. Like family that's not in your like immediate home, maybe your mother, grandmother, whoever, because, a lot of folks have not been able to go to Thanksgivings and the won't be able to go to Christmases or these other things. And like, we as African Americans, that's part of like our DNA is like connecting.
Big, yeah.
Right. It's a big thing, like connecting with your family, right? Like your whole family. And so a lot of us have been like not able to do that and trying to, save our mothers and, our fathers because they're the ones that are most vulnerable. Where I was looking for vulnerable.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's going to be a time for that too. I also agree with you as far as the art. A lot of my students, although some of them aren't coming to class, they're still doing art, right? Like they'll do art and hit me up like, Mr. Jones, what you think about this? What do you like this? You know what I'm saying? I'm like, well, you ain't been in class in like 3 weeks. Like what the fuck? But you still doing stuff that, because it's so much time on their hands. Like after class, like they don't really have anything to do. They can't go outside and be with friends and be, have to be inside.
I do think there's a caveat to the idea that we're seeing a new renaissance in that because we're in a pandemic now, it's more beneficial to people who are creators.
Right.
The one caveat I would say is it's only beneficial to a certain type of artist. So I was just on one of my group chats yesterday talking with some friends of mine, and we were, talking about how there's no live concerts. Like I was basically saying like that's one of my favorite things that I've done that, as an adult, like I would do for leisure. I go to at least 3 or 4 concerts a year, with friends or just by myself sometimes. And that's one of the things that I probably miss the most about this pandemic. What I found is that certain artists, or even like, I'm a fan of battle rap, right? So like a lot of these battle rap events now, they just had Smack Volume 6 on tonight. I was watching a little bit of that. But they've had to scale down the number of people because of COVID restrictions, right?
Right.
So now a lot of battle rappers that were successful in the past, when they were in these large venues with hundreds of people, and they thrive off of the energy that they get from the crowd. They're really good at manipulating the crowd reaction and using that to enhance their performance, are now struggling in this current climate where it's just a few people in the room or nobody in the room. It's just you and the person you're rapping against.
And your bar.
I'll cite my dude Kid Cudi. You know, like he's my Ohio friend. You know, like Kid Cudi dropped that album yesterday, and I was like, man, it's like Cudi still got it. Like, I was pleasantly surprised. Like, I was jamming that album all day yesterday, and then I thought about it, and I was like, well, Cudi, when he first came out over 10 years ago, he was like the first black emo rapper. You know what I mean? Like, before, you know, it became, before a lot of people that came after him, you know, the only rapper that I could really think of that was as popular as him was Eminem. You know, Eminem kind of made like emo and introverted style more popular in mainstream rap. And Cudi, you know, influenced Kanye and also kind of was very influential in his own right. You know, before Drake, there was Cudi. You know, and he's rapping about depression and, you know, struggling with addiction and things like that. So when I thought about it, I was like, well, it makes sense that Cudi would drop an album like this in the middle of the pandemic, because his music was always pandemic music. Like, you know, his stuff that he was doing 12 years ago could have came out. It would have been perfect. Everybody's inside the house right now. You know what I mean? Like, there's no big concerts and festivals right now. You know what I mean? So his style is catered to everybody just being in the house and listening to music on your earphones or whatever. Right. But yeah, like, so I do think that certain types of art are better consumed, and I think it's important to remember we live in a consumer society, right? So certain artists are going to thrive, and other artists are going to struggle.
Wait, all artists struggle. All artists struggle. It's our creativity that might be thriving, right? So even the musician, you might have time to now be in your studio and create some new work, right? But you can't have concerts and like, just like artists, we can't have art shows and you know, like even the tattoo game, like, you know, I'm a tattoo artist too. You know what I'm saying? So like tattooing is now different. Like tattooing with a mask, I've never had to tattoo with no mask. You know what I'm saying? So now I got to tattoo with a mask on, or decide not to tattoo at all because I'm coughing too much. You know what I'm saying? Like, so like we have to, like, all artists are hurting as far as the business side, but when it comes to the creative side, we've had time to create more and make more. You know, maybe on the internet, business has been booming because you're able to put your stuff out there for folks to listen. And that's what it is. But like, when it comes to like the people, which artists love to be around the people, not just like on a screen, you know what I'm saying? Like that's
song's kind of meant to me, and I wasn't around or alive for that moment, but it felt like it marked in an abundance of art to consume compared to the number of people or time that they had to consume it. Like people would consume, they could just consume, like they could read books. Like if you were interested in poetry or you like plays, you could just watch plays until you just couldn't watch. You just couldn't, if you didn't want to stop watching plays, like some of our aunties or some of our great grandparents or something like that, if they had something that they really liked. There was a time during the Renaissance where, like, if you like books, you could just read books all day and escape to reading books. And that was because somebody had enough time to write enough books that make you really want to write the books. And so, like, with the way that our current life is, like, I don't know if we would have been able to have a natural situation like that if it weren't for everybody slowing down. Even the celebs have had to slow down. And now you see them doing verses and see them doing stuff that you never would see them doing before. And that's because, like, they have time to think about creative things to do. And I mean, in my mind, I think that having the abundance of creativity, of creative pursuit, time for people to think about things is going to increase the quality of life that we all enjoy. Because we could always be caught up in the hustle and bustle of the American way, the corporate machine, or whatever industry we're a part of. But unless we slow all that down, we're never going to realize why we do all this in the first place. And I think that people starting to enjoy that and enjoy that is going to start making art become like when you enjoy life, art becomes a more prominent thing. You ever look in, you sit in your apartment, you've been going to work every day, and you didn't even notice until you was at home every day now. You don't got no paintings on the wall. You got no got no art, nothing, no color in your house at all. And now you're like, man, I'm tripping. So some people are going to start looking at consuming art, buying it online. So it's like, I'm sitting in my house all the time and I got to do work. And I'm sitting in this crazy corner with nothing to inspire me. Can I have something at home to inspire me? Versus people probably didn't even think about the value of art for years in our generation.
Right.
You know,
That's a great point. That's good. You know, the biggest indicator to me that the shift in how we consume art is, you know, we all grew up in the cassette/CD age now, right? And now we're in an era of streaming. You know, we were all in college when high-speed internet became a thing, and downloading. You know, Napster hit my freshman year of college. You know, and you know, you had these major groups suing, you know, because their music was getting illegally downloaded and pirated, right? So just earlier this week, they announced that Lil Wayne sold his licensing for his entire catalog for $100 million. I know I'm not going to say for a fact, but I'm pretty sure Lil Wayne net worth was at least $100 million, right? Before that deal. And they said there was some legal stuff that he's going through facing that may have forced him to do that before he really wanted to do it. But the first time I heard of somebody licensing out their catalog was when I found out that Michael Jackson owned the Beatles' entire catalog. I didn't even know that was possible. You know, Michael Jackson was savvy enough back in the 80s or 90s to purchase the licensing rights to the Beatles' entire catalog, right? But those type of deals were not common back then. Now, just in the past couple months, Lil Wayne is just the latest of several, many prominent, you know, recording artists, producers. The RZA sold his entire catalog to a company, and it's like one or two companies they're buying up. And the idea is that they own all the licensing rights, so when it comes to streaming and YouTube, they make money off of all of that, and they have 100% of their publishing, and they're selling their publishing and licensing rights for a lump sum. But what that tells me is that the artists, especially in the music industry, you know, they were making money hand over foot for years.
Right,
you know, when you had to have a physical copy, your overhead, your profit margin is a lot higher than when somebody's just paying $10 a month to stream your music unlimited as much as they want. So I think that now, you know, artists are trying to find it. Quincy Jones was another one that he sold his entire catalog.
No,
you know?
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Jones?
Yeah. Quincy Jones. Like, these are big names. Some of these people that are doing these deals are people that are not Lil Wayne, that have no reason to be in a position where they would do that. And it makes you think about it, like, why would they do that? Like,
they're pressed for cash, and the pandemic is having an opposite effect on them, meaning they're not able to get the type of like income coming in. I'm sorry,
they're
Nick.
not though. They're not pressed for cash. It's just the way it's a paradigm shift within the recording industry. And you know, like Kanye and several other people have talked about how these deals in the record industry have been uneven for a long time. Just the way they do contracts. You know, Dave Chappelle, his stand-up, he talked about how his stuff is being licensed out by Comedy Central. He doesn't own it. You know, but you know, now these people are finding new ways to create other income streams partially because of the pandemic and because of streaming and the shift in the industry. So I think that's a big indicator in terms of where things are going in terms of ownership for creators, whether it be a recording artist or a visual artist, whatever your form is.
It's like Russ, who decided to not submit to any labels, and he went completely independent, and he went platinum on his first album, and he made all the money off of it. And he's able to make all the money off of his shows, all of that kind of stuff like that. And so, like, he's motivated to make his art, whatever art he puts out gets consumed by the consumer, benefits from it directly.
And he's not the first. Chance was a similar before him, but yes.
Definitely not the first one. But the thing is, when you're an artist, you want to be able to have people consume your art, but you want to have people consume your art and you be able to benefit from it. If somebody sees the value in your art, you don't want to be the last person to benefit from that value.
Right. You want to get yours on the front end.
So yeah, that's why, you know, when I think about the Renaissance, what it also does, abundance of creativity and abundance of output, it allows you to maintain ownership of it because you're constantly putting it out. If somebody thought that they owned you, you constantly putting it out. Like Dave Chappelle, but nobody really owned Dave Chappelle because he's still out here putting out comedy, doing stand-up, making new material, and nobody owns his jokes. They may own Dave Chappelle's name, but they don't own Dave Chappelle's jokes. They don't own
his brand. Yeah, he's still his own brand.
And
but content he did with that show, he doesn't own it. And even to the point where he can't even create a new show called Chappelle Show. He would literally have to name it something different because they own the rights to the name. So what
Prince went through the same thing. Prince went through the same thing.
Yeah,
where like he had the I can't remember who it was, but like
the artist. He sued Warner Brothers. He was signed to Warner Brothers.
Warner Brothers. That's why he wrote like Slade on his face.
He came back as the artist formerly known as Prince because he was in a war with Warner Brothers over the rights to release new music. And that's something that Dave Chappelle highlighted in that stand-up special he just released where he was, you know, talking about it. But that also, you know, it's like the exact opposite. So now, you know, there a lot of these artists and creators, whether producers, rap, musicians, whatever, they're getting the money up front because for years, the way the at least the way the recording industry was structured was, you know, you get in advance, right? So like for struggling artists, you know, you're just trying to increase your exposure. So the label had the ability to market your music to all the radio stations across the country and like expand your reach. But in return, what you're getting or what you're giving them is, you know, part of your publishing, you know, where you don't even own the rights 100% to all your music. So then that label can sell your publishing to somebody else to use it in a commercial or for whatever they want to use it for. And you get $100,000 up front, but then your tour costs and your wardrobe and all of that stuff, your marketing budget comes out of that advance. And they don't explain, you know, a lot of people that are not in the position to be able to say, like, I'm going to turn down 100 G's because this deal isn't equitable. Like, I'm not getting ownership. I'm not getting, you know, full license over to use my art how I want to use it.
We fought a lot through that from the 90s here. You know, you still see some of that, but the 90s were the heyday of people really selling their art to labels outright. Like they were just trying to get signed by labels. They were waiting on a label to see the value, and labels had the complete leverage because if they saw the value in you, they could sign you. And whether or not other people saw the value in you, it didn't matter. Like back then, you could drop a tape and be dope, but if a label wasn't behind it, people probably still wouldn't value that music because who was signed to it. Now you got independent artists in that lane is wide open. So we transition to a time where it's almost your choice if you choose to go to a label. And when I speak of artists and I speak of art, I'm not just talking about the music industry, even though I know a lot of our, you know, our artists do become, you know, musicians. I still think of visual art as a very prominent thing. I still think as writing and poetry and spoken word and all of those things as viable pieces of aspects of art. And as those aspects grow, because honestly, some of the downturn of the music industry might help some of these artists go into other forms of art that are better suited for them because they may be a better poet. I used to say Tupac was a better poet than anything. I think
I agree with that.
As we start getting into better forms of, you know, art and actually being able to express ourselves from the natural way we want to express ourselves, that's the actual place we want to be. Not the place where we are like, who's going to consume our art, but it's more like, what do I want to create? You know, and when we get to that point, that's when we're actually at a place where I think we're really able to change the culture. Because if we're always trying to make art for the consumption mindset, we're always fulfilling the need that's there. But when the mindset of people actually go out and create, that's when they go and create what's going to be in the future. You know what I'm saying? And so I am
more meaningful art.
Exactly.
Art is more meaningful versus like This is just to be consumed.
Consumption.
That can be like visual art, musical art. You know what I'm saying? You got some folks that like they'll put out an album because the release date is coming up. You know what I'm saying? And they just got to put it out. You know, versus like, okay,
that happened with Chance just now. Like his manager sued, filed a lawsuit for $3 million because his last album that came out last year or earlier this year didn't perform up to expectation, and his former manager is suing him for $3 million because of potential earnings that were lost because he was trying to he got married and right around the same time that he was releasing the album, and his manager was like, yeah, like you're taking on too much, but he had a wedding planned and he did all this, and they said the album was rushed and it didn't really get executed the way they wanted to. It was supposed to be his debut album. There was a lot of anticipation behind it, but it didn't perform that well sales wise and just critically compared to his previous work.
Right.
And the other thing that I think of with just this whole topic is going forward, like what that means for the way people conduct business. Because again, it's a consumer society, and like a lot of these artists are exploited by these companies that have a lot of resources and connections, and they literally can make stars from scratch. Almost like you created in a lab, but that's for the purpose of being consumed to maximize profit. You have those, and there's always been that dichotomy between people that just do it for the love, for the art of creating something groundbreaking, something timeless, something classic, and people that are doing it for mass consumption.
Right.
And I think it's important to sell it. It's important to distinguish that because, especially now, without these artists being able to tour and throw these huge stadium concerts where you can pack 50,000, however many thousand people into one place, and they pay $50 per person, like the millions and millions of dollars that are generated. That's what's really hurting these artists is the fact that they're not able to tour.
But that's what I was saying. Is like, that's what's hurting these artists, in my opinion. Like the tours are gone. Yeah. They can't sell out these concerts. And like they got bills, like these artists have serious bills.
Yes,
like now they're kind of strapped to just do like whatever, like sell off your catalog. That sounds crazy. Mm-hmm. For $100 million for Lil Wayne to sell it for $100 million.
It sounds low, right?
It sounds very
low.
low.
You should get way more than that. That's what I said. Like, whoa, $100 million.
But even to know that folks like Quincy Jones, whose work is timeless,
like,
to hear that he's selling off, his rights or whatever, that sounds
ownership.
It makes me feel like I'm losing something. I don't even know the man. You know what I'm saying?
And what's funny about that is nobody talks because I mean I pay attention to stuff like that, but at the same time, like Taylor Swift, they talk about. I just heard them talk about it on the Joe Budden podcast, but. Scooter Braun, who is mostly known for discovering Justin Bieber, and he's a big time promoter and industry mover and shaker. He purchased the rights to her first 5 or 6 albums for a large sum of money, and she had no control over that happening. Like her label that she was on, they sold the rights to her music to him. He sold it to somebody else, and now. Even though she's one of the biggest names in the music industry, she can either make new music and still sell millions and own and have 100% ownership of that, or she can re-record her old material and re-release it and have ownership of that. But it's not just like you said, like Quincy Jones. That's a name that surprises. The difference is Wayne, sold his for $100 million. People like Quincy and I think L.A. Reid did a similar deal, or the RZA, they're getting more like 200, 300 million for their catalogs. If you have a 20-year career, if you have a career as long as Lil Wayne's, that just kind of speaks to, like Wayne is a generational artist. there's very few people that have had his influence and his longevity in music in our lifetime, especially in hip hop. But if you look at him versus a Jay-Z, that just shows you the difference between doing good business and doing smart business, and doing business where you maybe are exploited because you trusted somebody too much that discovered you at an early age, or you were just too loyal.
Comes back to when we speak about the Renaissance. I think that what we're seeing is a time for us to start realizing how to make art be the focus. I think that the consumption and the industry of the art, whether we're talking about music or whether we're talking about other forms of art that are consumed, we have to start thinking about how we're actually going to be creating it, because all things are forms of art. Even what we're creating right here is a form of art. And I appreciate you guys coming together to do it. And what it does is it allows us to create something that our kids can look at and people can look at in the future and get an idea of a story that we're telling, and learn how to tell their story. That's the value in art. And as we start to learn how to make more of it, and more people, not just famous celebs, but when the everyday person is creating that, telling their stories, we're going to actually start being able to change the culture, because people who tell their stories are usually able to change the world, because they change the world through those stories they tell. So I encourage everyone out there to learn how to tell your story as we tell ours. The story for MXM Radio, the Martin Times Malcolm podcast, the story we like to tell is recapture the revolutionary. And I appreciate you guys coming out tonight to talk about some good topics, and as we expound upon them, I think that one of the themes that comes through is you definitely want to have a good sense of education for the students out here. People who are out here in the world who are learning virtually need to have some support. So do the teachers. We also need to think about having a better sense of educating our students at home in different ways that involve things that are not just academic, but teaching them about art, teaching them about life skills, and helping them get those things that they're not getting as the pandemic still rages.